McCartney, listen to what the man said. I'm joined now by Sherry Evans, founder and CEO of Market Clarity. Sherry is internationally acknowledged as a cutting-edge technology futurist, commentator, strategy advisor and thought leader with a track record of forecasting the impact of technology innovations. Sherry, thank you for joining us and good afternoon.
Hello, Brian.
Now, could you explain that to me in English, please?
In English, what it means is that I spend a lot of my time going into research labs to look at the things that are cooking new innovations, and then I weave it into a vision of the future, and I help companies design innovation programs and basically help them save money, make money, or solve a problem.
Right. Now tell us, if we go into the area of cybercrime, which I think you'd like to talk about,
yes.
What have we got in that area to do with mobile phones, let's say?
Well, most people may not be aware that the applications that they load onto their smartphones may not always be what they seem. I'll give you a couple of examples. There was a flashlight app called Brightest Flashlight Free, which ran on Android, and you would think that a flashlight wouldn't do much more than just turn the light on. But it was tracking users' every move and sending that information to third-party advertisers, so literally following people around. And another really famous exploit where hackers abused mobile phone applications are all of these hundreds of Flappy Bird clones. And they had malware in them, which literally lets these software applications get root access onto your phone. They can get into anything. They can take over your phone. They can make phone calls. They can get your complete address book. They can literally access anything that you have on your smartphone. So you've got a very hostile environment that most people are not aware of.
So those type of malware, they could track maybe passwords and that as you logged into banks?
Oh, absolutely. And if you think about what's happening with banking applications, there's a big push to put things like PayPass directly on your phone. Put all of your information in digital wallets. And if you're not careful what else you might have on your phone, you could find yourself in financial strife or maybe even have your identity stolen.
Now, a lot of people use PayPal. What's the best way to keep that safe?
Oh, not PayPal. I was talking about PayPass. That's where you're using near-field communications and you're waving your credit card over a terminal, and it's not requiring a PIN or any other access to pay. There is technology that allows that type of application to reside on your mobile phone as well.
So can somebody walk past you and effectively get some information off your phone? As if you had touched?
Potentially, if you've got a malware-infected phone, or if someone has found a way to breach the security of the application that you're using for contactless payments on your phone.
Right.
Certainly, white hat researchers have found some flaws, and hopefully they'll be corrected before these things roll out in a major way.
Now, leaving aside phones and computers, which I think a lot of people are probably a little bit aware of at least, what else can people hack into?
Well, again, anything that's connected to the internet, unfortunately, can be hacked into. Even the satellite communications on airplanes. Hackers have found a way to do that by getting in through the plane's in-flight entertainment systems and through Wi-Fi, and they've been able to get to navigation and safety systems. Luckily, this was a white hat hacker who did this, a security researcher, as opposed to someone who was trying to crash a plane. There have been numerous instances where both white hat researchers and presumably...
You mean white hat, you mean a good guy to some extent?
Yeah, good guys, security researchers.
Black hats, white hats. You're going back to the old cowboy movies.
Yes, exactly. But that's actually what they call it.
Right.
Field. So you've got white hat, which are the good guys, and black hat, which are the bad guys. And luckily for us, so far we only know of white hat good guys who've done this, but researchers have been able to hack into insulin pumps in people's bodies and deliver fatal doses of insulin. They've been able to hijack pacemakers and deliver lethal shocks. Again, luckily, researchers as opposed to cyber criminals.
Wow.
But there are also attacks that might be relevant to everyday people who are, let's say, putting baby monitors connected to the internet into their home. There's been real-world instances where the bad guys have hacked into this and woken babies up in the middle of the night. People, hear this strange man's voice and say, well, what's going on? And they realize it's coming through the baby monitor. Hackers have even been able to open the logic, the logic programmers on prison cell doors.
And did anybody escape in that process?
I don't know whether this particular instance was done by a black hat hacker, but it certainly has been done by, one of the security researchers who were finding flaws in the system. But if the good guys can do it, you can imagine that the bad guys can too.
So you're saying really is that some of the big technology companies are hiring guys to try and hack their programs and their apps?
Well, there's a whole big industry of security companies. So they do that for a living. They sell security devices and software, and that's their mission, is to try to protect and fortify company assets and government assets and people's computers. And there are academic researchers that also do this. But there are very, very well-funded cyber criminal organizations who literally run like corporations, and they have that as their mission. They look for vulnerabilities and they exploit them.
Now, we're hearing a lot about driverless cars coming up. Google and others are looking at that. Can they be hacked? I mean, you can imagine the consequences.
Well, it's not only driverless cars that can be hacked. Today's cars can be hacked, which is really scary. In fact, there was a researcher up in Queensland at the University of Queensland where they have a Center for Accident Research and Road Safety. It's called CARS. And last year he produced some research that showed how all kinds of existing cars can be hacked through what's called the CAN bus, which is in pretty much every car, and it allows you to control all the electronics in the car. And it can be used to control things like airbags, brakes, cruise control, power steering systems. And it can be accessed locally or remotely with simple devices. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what things could be done to a car. And you can imagine the consequences of that, Brian.
Now, just possibly to go a little off track with cybercrime, what can somebody do in their own house in just the way they operate there? People will have, paperwork and bills and other things they might throw in the bin. They'll have Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, LinkedIn, etc. What's the best way for them to protect themselves?
Well, one of the things that I always am concerned about is identity fraud, and I think that's or identity theft, which is where you're leading, Brian. When it comes to social media, people are not aware sometimes that by putting a lot of things on Facebook, let's say about their personal life, that they're actually inviting crime into their lives. So, for instance, if you're posting pictures that have your GPS location as part of it, people can very quickly figure out exactly where you live. If you have your real birth date on a website, again, it's another really interesting piece of vital information. If you post a picture of a brand new car or a new TV or something else that's expensive that you bought, again, you're sort of waving a red flag, and combine it with the other information and a post about, hey, can't wait to get on the plane for New York. We're going on vacation for a month. Well, guess what? You might as well be saying, I'm going away for a month and I've got all this great stuff in my house. Please come and rob me. So people do some silly things. They don't realize that it's not just their close friends that will see it. It's anybody who might have access to their information. And many people don't lock their information down just to their friends. And frankly, when you look at social media, your friends on social media may be people that you've never met.
Yes. And a lot of people like to have lots and lots of friends, but, it's a new definition of the word friend, I think.
That's right. So, personally, I'm always very circumspect about the things that I might post on social media. I tend to put very little about my private life out in the public domain, but I put lots of information about my work life and my research and futuristic topics.
Right. I actually closed my Facebook account some time ago because I ended up not doing much posting, but I got a little bit tired of finding out what people were eating and where they were going and things like that I really didn't want to know.
And what they had for breakfast,
yes.
Coffee shop they're at. People put so much information out there, but they don't realize that what they're doing is creating digital footprints that never, ever go away. And, it's not just what you put on Facebook. If you even think about the things that you do with Google and the many different applications they have, it's a trade. You're getting free services for your information. But if someone were to, let's say, get access to your applications or your logins and be able to put that together, they could develop a very comprehensive picture of your daily activities, who you talk to, all of your contacts, maybe your calendar. If you have IoT devices in your house, like the Nest device that Google owns, that company, where it's a smart device with artificial intelligence, and it learns about your family's patterns. It might, people can have access to that kind of information as well. So there's a lot of potential harm that can come from someone getting access to all of the things that social media networks know about you.
To me, sometimes, and it's certainly some years ago, you'd hear a story that when there was a funeral on, a house would get robbed because they knew everyone was out. Anything similar happening when people are watching social media and say, well, that couple's out, so there's nobody in their house, etc.?
I'm sure it does.
Yeah. So people, I suppose, need to be careful, don't they? Particularly where they are, what they're doing, etc.
Absolutely. And it's going to get even crazier in the future with the kinds of technology that's being developed. Augmented reality is this really interesting technology. Think of Google Glass. Have you heard of that, Brian?
Google Glass, yes.
In concept?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're wearing these smart glasses, and it's got a camera on it, and you can see in your vision superimposed, maybe navigation directions. But you can also take videos and do other things. Now, imagine that somebody's walking down the street, and they have these kinds of glasses on, and the cameras in technology are getting better and better. They're able to do facial recognition. So somebody comes up to you and says, "Hi, Brian," but you've never actually met them before, but they've matched your face through facial recognition with your social media profile, and they're pulling out information that they're seeing in real time. And basically what they're doing is social engineering, and suddenly you think it's somebody that you ought to know, and you tell them things that you wouldn't tell a complete stranger.
Right.
I think that's another vector for identity crime in the future as well, where people will literally be tricked into thinking they know someone and start chatting about things they shouldn't.
An old school friend or something you haven't met in 20 years, etc.
Yeah, and you're like, oh gosh, I can't remember that guy's face. I know I should remember. He knows all the stuff about me. He's got to be the real deal. But really, not at all.
What should people do? What's their best attitude to all of this?
Well, when it comes to things like social engineering, you don't really need high tech to do it. I mean, con people have been doing that for years. So I think you just need to have a sense of street smart. And when it comes to things like buying anything that's connected to the internet, smart TVs or some of the new Internet of Things appliances, you need to ask what kind of security is in place in that device, and make sure that you change the password. Do not leave the default password on, because that's asking for somebody to hack into it. You're just making it so easy by not changing that password.
Yeah, tell me now, of all the different age groups, younger people, teenagers, up to older people, which group has had the most problems in this area? I mean, what I'm saying is, are young people more savvy than older people, or the other way around?
I find a mix. And I also find a mix of ages when it comes to being cautious. You know, you might try to generalize and say older people are more cautious than younger people. But I've seen lots of people in their mid-40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond that are totally oblivious to the threat. And I see young people that are really savvy about their privacy. So I don't know that you can put an age label on it. But I think in general, younger people haven't had bad things happen to them. So in general, they tend to be less cautious of bad things happening than older people. But that's a truism in life.
Older and wiser, isn't
with
it?
technology. Yes. You know, if you've been burnt a couple of times, you learn to recognize the danger signals. But not everybody learns.
But at the same time, when you look, say, at driverless cars, the benefits to them will be just, you'll be able to go and have a drink and the car will bring you home.
Absolutely.
You know, all sorts of pluses.
Yes, and 90% of road accidents are caused by human error.
Yeah.
And driverless cars have the potential to eliminate many, many accidents. But before we go completely driverless, there needs to be a whole lot of thinking about the ethics of driverless cars when there is a situation where an accident is unavoidable. So let's say you've got a car moving at a fairly high speed, you know, above 60K, 70K, 80K, and somebody trips onto the road or does something unexpected. Does the car hit the person, or do they slam on the brakes, maybe causing a pileup? Who gets to make those decisions? And they're hard decisions when no matter what you can see or what's programmed into the car,
and
somebody is going to get
I've
hurt.
read as well that they have problems in things like this, thunderstorms and that type of thing as well.
Oh, I haven't heard about problems in thunderstorms.
I wasn't sure why, but I heard it was thunderstorms and strong gales and the likes can cause problems.
Yeah, I think it would depend on the types and numbers of sensors on the car. But where I think we'll see driverless cars come in first will be in what I would call an autopilot feature. Just like you've got cruise control on your car,
right?
They started to come into top-end models first. Even as far as 5 years ago, we've had some of the top-end cars that are able to do auto parking. That's actually a robot driving the car.
Okay.
There are tests already happening in Australia next month in Adelaide, where they'll be closing a highway for a period of time for a driverless car trial. And they want to see how well, it's Volvo that's doing it, they want to see how well the autopilot mode works in Australian conditions, because we have different wildlife and, you know, you want to test these things around the world. So I think what we'll see is that we'll have autopilot features that we're allowed to use on certain highways first, and then gradually we'll get down to secondary roads and then smaller streets.
Shara, thank you very much. It's been very interesting, and there's very exciting times ahead.
Thank you so very much, and I appreciate you taking me onto your program.
Have a terrific weekend. Cheers.
Everyone loves a sausage sizzle.
Uh-huh.
So come and enjoy one while strolling through the magical gardens.